guys. So, I've always been kind of fascinated by what makes the body work and how it works. And as a 20-year programmer and graphic designer, I've pulled my share of all-nighters and have you know, done the coffee dance and all sorts of other things to try to keep my body functioning at a high level through, you know, 3-day work sessions and ending in a presentation and those kinds of things. So for a long time, I've kind of experimented with what works and doesn't work for my body. And what I was finding was a lot of the common assumptions were just wrong with regard to, you know, pounding coffee and energy drinks and things. My body was doing a lot better without those things. So water and those kinds of just substitutes, healthier substitutes as opposed to energy drinks and Red Bulls. So what I wanted to do was share some of my experiences as well as just the hardcore science behind why certain things work and why some things don't work. Because I can stand up here and preach to people all day long that you shouldn't drink, you know, diet sodas and energy drinks and those kinds of things, but I just, as Chase grabbed the here. But I wanted to explain a little bit about why certain things affect your body in certain ways, and I guess kind of the science behind it. And I wanted to start with sleep, mainly because I want to end with water. But sleep is the thing that probably all of us in this room go without more than anything else, nutrition included. But sleep is really kind of the cornerstone of health. And just wanted to give a kind of a quick breakdown of what happens when you sleep is the pineal gland, which is they call it the window because of the eye of the mind. But it produces melatonin. And melatonin is a hormone that regulates that sleep and wake cycle. And the fascinating part that I think a lot of us have no idea of is that this melatonin is triggered actually by darkness. So as the sun starts to set, your brain starts to lower body temperature and produce this melatonin in your brain, which then triggers the sleepiness and you know, starts to slow your body down and get it ready for sleep. So as we're starting to, you know, we put the kids to bed or, you know, finish the normal work day and we're about ready to hit our all-nighter, your body is physically going through the effects of trying to slow itself down. And so, and it does that by first producing this melatonin. And the reason that it's important to know this is because you can do some natural things to keep yourself awake or to put yourself to sleep. And and I'll talk a little bit about that. But so in addition to putting yourself to sleep, though, it is an incredibly powerful, probably the most powerful antioxidant in the body. And so the reason your body restores itself every night with sleep is because of this antioxidant. And so the melatonin in your body goes out and it fights against the free radicals in your body. It helps to repair cells. It can also reduce migraines. So a lot of people have, especially women. My mom had a really bad problem with migraines and ended up taking hormones to reduce the migraines, and part of that was this increase in melatonin. So it has a lot of effects in addition to just helping you sleep better. So this, I thought, was, these last 2 points were, to me, very startling. I had no idea that basically what happens is, if you, a lot of us watch TV, we read with the lights on, we do activities, we might clean the house with the lights at full blower, but this artificial lighting in the room preceding bedtime can shorten your production of that melatonin by up to 90 minutes a night. So just as simple as just watching TV or doing things with the lights on in your house can actually interrupt your sleep. Even if you're going to bed at a good time, it can still retard some of the production of that melatonin. So it's very important that, you know, up to like an hour before bedtime, we start to slow things down, turn the lights down, and really kind of prepare our environments for sleep. Additionally, this was what was crazy to me, was by sleeping with even a night light on, you can reduce the production, you suppress the melatonin production by more than 50%. So all of that great hormone that your body is producing, and it's helping you to to stave off cancer and to repair cells and all of the other great benefits, in addition to just restoring your body and mind. Simple night light, bathroom light, hall light, especially if we have kids, a lot of us do this where we keep kind of a hall light on. It can absolutely destroy your sleep and the restorative properties of that. Sure.
What about like alarm clocks?
I didn't see anything that supported that small amount of amber light or anything would do it, but it's probably best to maybe face it away from you, especially if it's right on your nightstand pointing right in your face. And basically again, it starts with, as the sun goes down and your body starts to produce this melatonin, and then it all kind of goes from there. So the more you can reduce your light before bedtime, the better on that. So some of the effects of that lack of sleep and the lack of the melatonin is obviously the brain and the mood, the memory and cognitive abilities decrease. So we can all experience that. That's an easy one. You don't sleep, you can't think. But it's actually linking a lot to things like bipolar disorders and Alzheimer's. If you've known anyone who's done a lot of crystal meth or those kinds of drugs that keep you up for days at a time and you start to see just the crazed effects, a lot of that is not necessarily the drugs on the brain, but it's the lack of sleep that causes a lot of that behavior and lack of cognitive abilities. Talked a little bit about the hormone imbalances with headaches and things like that, but also lower back pain. So a lot of us, we feel like we work all night and sitting down is what's causing our backs to hurt. A lot of times that can be caused, yes, by working all night and sitting down like that, but it's also a decrease in melatonin. So the melatonin goes in there and it can repair those kinds of things. And so the free radicals that I talked about, they attack the neurons, which degrades the long-term cognitive function. So that's just a one-to-one causality there, where if we're not out, producing the melatonin to reduce those free radicals, they're just attacking the neurons and just directly affecting brain function on that. I always thought this was kind of an interesting one, that the memories are consolidated. So picture, your brain is this sort of messy room of ideas and thoughts and memories and everything. And one of the things that studies are increasingly showing is during sleep, where most of our body functions slow down, body temperature lowers, heart rate lowers, those kinds of things. But memory and brain function is actually increased sharply during sleep. Not only during REM, but especially during REM, but pretty much through the whole cycle. And there are theories about what's happening there. The one that I kept coming across was that the memories are being consolidated and stored into long-term memory. Brain activity, as I said, during REM may actually be higher than when you're awake, which I think was kind of startling to me, but a lot of that, is dreaming, vivid dreams and things. So, your body needs that, your mind certainly needs that. Heart rests during sleep. This is especially important to high stress, overweight, high physical stress people as well, where by letting your heart rest for that 8 hours and allowing it to start to repair itself and to restore some of those abilities is incredibly important. HGH, growth hormone, an incredibly powerful hormone that everything from strength, cognitive abilities, skin cell rejuvenation, all of those things. If you followed anything in health with regard to HGH and the human growth hormone, it's a wonder drug. It's an absolute fountain of youth. So by not sleeping, you're decreasing the production of that hormone. And so if you look at our ability to work and to function on a daily basis, it might be very tempting to kind of stay up. And Chuck and you and I were talking about this the other day. And my personality is, if I have a problem, I will stay up until 6 o'clock in the morning trying to fix that problem, thinking that that's the right way to do it because I just can't give up on it. But really what my body needs is for me to go to bed and then attack that problem in the morning and to make that up somewhere else. Because you really can't go back and reclaim sleep. Once you lose it, it's gone. You're never going to, the next night by sleeping 10 hours, you're not going to double your production of this human growth hormone. And then obviously the cellular repair with digestion and growth are all linked to sleep as well. So some of the things that you can do with regard to proper sleep, and trust me, this is the hardest thing, is kind of staying on a schedule, forcing myself to go to bed, especially if you have kids and deadlines and all the other things. Sometimes it's hard to just shut everything down and go to bed. But to regulate your time and environment of sleep. So get used to a certain specific window of sleep, whether it's within an hour or 2 hours, but try to get your body used to that so that your body knows when to start producing that melatonin, and your body will start to know when it will and won't produce it. So one of the things that I recommend is, if you're going to stay up late, try to do it on the weekends or sometimes when you're not necessarily going to have to be productive that next day. Reduce the lighting up to an hour before bed. That's kind of the hard one. I get a lot of work done at night in terms of like housework, cleaning up the kitchen, those kinds of things. But just dim the lights. Try to get your body used to feeling that that feeling of the melatonin, rushing into your body and getting that drowsy feeling going. Read instead of watch TV. This is a tough one here. This books over digital when you're reading, especially with regard like if you're reading on an iPad. So the light coming back. Switch it so that it's black background with white text, things like that. Just try to reduce that light as much as you can. And this is a big one here where if you are doing all-nighters and you're maybe getting a few hours of sleep in the morning or during the sunlight hours, is buy some blackout shades. You can get them where they fit up behind curtains and you can't even see them when they're up, but pull them down and try to get that room as dark as you possibly can. Sugar in the body. So the brain needs between 125 and 150 grams of glucose or sugar per day to function. So I know a lot of you are thinking, got it covered. I'll eat my 5 Snickers and drink my Red Bulls, I'm good. But the problem with doing it that way is it's not so much what sugars you eat. It is what sugars you eat, but the brain, in the end of the day, doesn't necessarily know Snickers sugar versus a yam sugar. But what it does know is this glucoregulation. So what happens is when you drink an energy drink or a sugary drink or eat candy over a complex carbohydrate like fruit or yams or brown rice, those kinds of things, I'm actually, I think I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. But basically, I'm going to jump ahead and then I'll come back because I'm already on that path. There we go. Okay, so the refined versus the complex carbs, basically it's in the release cycle. That's the big difference to your body. So what happens is when you drink those sugary drinks or eat candy, the blood sugar is released very rapidly into the blood, like instantly. So if you eat an apple, your body has to digest it. The sugar is released over a longer span of time. But when you drink a soda, let's say, or even fruit juice for that matter, but it cues serotonin, which is the brain chemical that makes you feel happy, so you get a nice little high and you feel like this is great. But that massive spike triggers the pancreas to start pumping out insulin. And so what happens is that insulin gets into the blood and starts soaking up the sugar, which then starves your brain of that sugar, which it needs to function. And so the sugar then, your muscles are going to turn that into energy, your brain's going to turn that into energy. And so once that's starved is then you get the crash. And what happens then when you crash is your brain starts to go, oh, I need to go back up. And so it triggers another cycle to say, I want more sugar. And so you come up and then it throws you down and up and down, up and down, and up and down. And then you find that you drank 6 sodas throughout the day because you just can't stay awake. And so that is, to me, this was very telling. So you always hear, like, don't eat sugar, or, eat this or eat that, but why? The brain doesn't really know the difference between table sugar and, again, a banana in terms of the sugar. But this cycle doesn't happen with refined sugar, with unrefined sugars. So, again, fruits and vegetables, brown rices, and any complex carbohydrates that are slow-release energy types of things. Now, this is obviously great if you do need, something for the next 30 minutes. If you're trying to, right before a presentation or something where you're trying to push yourself over, then you can sort of use this against itself. Just know what's coming in the end of this. This is going to be a perpetual cycle that basically only sleep will break. So, so the proper intake of sugar. Obviously, don't eat candy or refined sugars. I know that's not going to happen. I enjoy sugar and candy as much as the next person. But this is something very important to remember, is that protein, when ingested with these sugars, can help to regulate those glucose levels. So, for instance, if you're going to have dessert, it's best to eat that dessert with your meal or immediately following your meal, as opposed to maybe waiting an hour and then going out for ice cream or something. It really is best to kind of try to eat those together. So if you're, especially if you're going to have some good protein with it. I'm not a doctor, and frankly, I'm not anywhere near a chemist, so I can't tell you the exact reasons. A good book to look at that is Sugar Busters. Explains in great detail the exact chemistry behind that suppression of the glycogen spike. And then also, if you are going to have some sugary snacks and those kinds of things, which is a little counterintuitive to this space, is try to do it when you don't have to be productive, where you don't need to continue the cycle. So if you're going to go eat some candy, but then, do it at a time where you're not going to need to chase that candy with some soda an hour later, and then so on and so forth, where you're just constantly in that cycle all day. And then obviously exercise is a great way. So if you are going to do some of these things with regard to sugary drinks, it does help to exercise either during or right after to move that sugar through the bloodstream. And then water. Water is definitely, looks like my slide got bumped out. Okay. Water, to me, is the most important thing. Sleep is important, but I think that we can all kind of learn to deal with increases and decreases in levels of sleep, especially over time, and I think we all kind of go into cycles about you can sleep a little bit longer in certain periods of time, and same with sugar and exercise, we all fluctuate on those kinds of things. But water is something that it happens so fast with regard to hydration and dehydration, and the effects are so stark and startling that without a proper understanding of water, the other two things, you'll end up in kind of a very repetitive cycle of bad behavior. So the body needs roughly 64 ounces of water each day, because the average person loses about 90. So the 64 is assuming that you're going to be drinking some coffee and some other things along the way. But really look at that 90 ounces is what you're really going to need. And whatever you ingest in water, unless you're drinking 10 gallons of water a day, your body's just going to release that as urine. There are some dangers to drinking too much water, but for 99% of us, it really isn't something that that'll affect. It's called hyponatremia. It's how you'll hear a lot of people dying during marathons because they drank too much water. Essentially, they just flush all their salts out, and then they basically they drown internally is essentially what happens. But it's not something that we all have to worry about typically, because you're not flushing your salts at the same time. And this is basically if you're anytime you pass your body mass index or your what is considered normal weight, figure you're going to need an additional 8 ounces of water for 25 pounds of weight that you're carrying. And that is a good rule of thumb, and I think it's always beneficial to drink as much as you can. So this is an absolute bare minimum, this 64 ounces. And once you get into a habit of drinking, it's pretty easy to drink that 64. I think just use bigger containers will help you do that. The body is 70% water, brain is 80%. I think we all have heard that about 1,000 times. But really take that in for a second and think about, head to toe, 70% of your body is water. And so by depriving yourself of those things, or just filling it up with bad liquids in terms of sodas and things like that, more than you're drinking of water. Yes, sir?
Is that like an average nationwide? Because it's got to be a lot higher here, right?
Yeah, I think your body still regulates itself to the same amount. I go to humid environments and I feel like I get incredibly dehydrated. So, I think that, if it's 65 to 75%, it's possible that you would have that fluctuation. A startling, I don't know if it's on the next slide or not, if it's here, this right here. We don't fluctuate that much. 5% of drop in hydration can cause death. 2% can cause Alzheimer's-like symptoms. So just think of that, 2% of water. So if you need roughly, call it 90 ounces of water a day. If you're not getting that, if you go the whole day, maybe you just have a couple cups of coffee and you drink maybe a glass of water throughout the day, you kind of forget. you might not realize it, but your productivity for work is plummeting. You know, you might feel a little tired, you might feel a little thirsty, but the reality is, if you were to sit down and take an IQ test, I guarantee you your points are dropping. And for every hour that you don't start to drink water and hydrate your brain, you will lose points. So, you know, bless you. So, you know, as you start pumping in the energy drinks, you know, keep that kind of a thing in mind. And that's, is it on this one? Yeah, this third point here. So alcohol and caffeine are diuretics. So basically what a diuretic is it sucks the water out of that cell, and it actually blocks water from entering the cell. And so when you drink these, you're going to require at least 50% more of that beverage than you would normally have in water. Okay, so if you have 16 ounces of water, or of water normally, then you would need 50% more, or 8 more ounces of that sports drink. Then if you take that sports drink and then you go back to what we were talking about, sugar and its effects on the body, then you start to see that, you know, you're hydrating, but you're also introducing sugar into the brain, which is blocking certain chemicals and things from working well in your brain. So the liver and the brain are the least tolerant to dehydration, unfortunately. So what happens is the first thing that you start feeling when you start to get a little bit dehydrated is that tired feeling. It's because your brain and your liver are literally starting to slow down. And what happens is that the cells start to say, hey, we don't have any water in here, and they start reaching outward. I think it's on the cell, on this slide. That it basically starts reaching out and starts stealing water and liquid away from your skin. So your skin starts to get dry, papery, your eyes dry out, and it's your brain and your liver and then ultimately your gut and other places start to pull that water in from outside your body and start pulling it into the cells, just causing fatigue. This is one of the fascinating things. My family has a really high rate of Alzheimer's. Both my grandmothers have Alzheimer's. We can already see it. I hope she's not watching this eventually, but my mom, who's only 65 years old, is already starting to kind of have memory lapses and things. And I know for a fact that my mom works a night shift at the hospital. She drinks very little water. And I saw increasing articles pointing to this right here, where Alzheimer's, they're starting to believe is basically possibly not, there's no real concrete evidence yet, but it may be long-term dehydration. And if you start to look at, you know, the things like, you know, my mom lives on Diet Coke and soda in general, and those kinds of beverages, but it's not water, and water is really what your body needs. So this is what I was talking here with regard to the skin being the first to suffer the effects as the cells start to pull the water in. And this is another thing here, is that your sense of thirst starts to diminish with age. So you might not realize that you're feeling thirsty, but as you get older, your body's going to feel like it needs it less, when in fact, in reality, you're going to need it a lot more. Especially if you're carrying extra weight, which a lot of us do as we age. So these I'll just kind of go through pretty quickly. This is just a long list. But your first sign is that exhaustion, that lack of energy. So a lot of times is when we're all sitting here in Gangplank or other places at work, is you start to feel run down, and you know, I had a big lunch, and I just need more sleep or whatever. A lot of times it's just a little bit of dehydration. Again, keep in mind that 2% is all that it needed to cause, you know, really bad brain function. 5% is death. So it doesn't take much to start feeling this right here, which is obviously detrimental to work. Constipation, acid reflux. Your intestines need a tremendous amount of water to produce or to process foods and waste. If you look at it purely from a work standpoint, I don't know, you know, I know how I feel. If I've got some constipation or acid reflux, it's not going to be my most productive day. Blood pressure. Blood plasma is 92% water, so most of your blood is in fact water. As you start to dehydrate, that the blood thickens, it forces your heart and lungs to work harder, which is obviously going to lead to a little bit more exhaustion. So you start feeling exhausted up here, your blood thickens, you know, now all of a sudden your body's pumping harder. Asthma. So dehydration triggers histamine. So now, in addition to lack of energy, in addition to your blood getting thicker, all of a sudden you have histamines in your lungs, which are reducing the production of oxygen in your lungs a little bit. Extra weight and obesity. Dehydration fools the body into hunger. So oftentimes when we're really thirsty, we feel like we're hungry. And so we start eating more and more and more and more, which then goes up into the intestines, which causes more water to be sucked out of the cells, so it's, as you can see, kind of everything, every part of dehydration really kind of builds on itself, which just causes a worsening of the effects. And so what I recommend is just drink a ton of water. I mean, really, you're not going to drink too much water. If you're exercising and you're outside in the heat, then yes, definitely start looking at sports drinks and other electrolyte replacements. But for the most part, you can't drink too much water. So, and every time you feel like, and trust me, I'm not always practicing what I preach. I drink a tremendous amount of coffee and things, but I try to chase coffee with a lot of water as well. But so when you're feeling it, what I would really encourage all of you to do is to try to take like a week or two and think about some of the things that we talked about. When you start feeling tired, when you start feeling hungry, when you start feeling dehydrated, obviously, and start replacing things with water, start replacing sugars with more complex types of things like nuts and other things. Try to go for different snacks. And just listen to your body. Listen to your body for a week, and it's pretty startling. I found out, I studied architecture at ASU, and we, from your freshman year in studio, you're doing all-nighters, building these big projects and doing all these drawings. And I would literally have like a coffee pot in my home office where I was doing these things. And one night I just started slamming ice water, and I drank like 10 glasses of ice water, and I felt amazing. I felt like, I was tired, obviously, at 6 o'clock in the morning, I was tired, but it was nowhere near the loopiness and kind of the craziness you feel with coffee. And so now, anytime I have something where I'm going to be working all night, I eat a little bit of protein throughout the night. So I'll grab like a Greek yogurt or something that's kind of an easy to digest protein throughout the night, and just drink ice water, as much of it as I can. The other benefit of ice water also is that you burn calories when you're drinking ice water, because your body has to regulate its temperature, so you actually burn calories by drinking ice water. That's it. So most of you guys know me here, but if you need to contact me, I'm Troy Bousseau. I'm at Troy Bousseau at Twitter, and I'm Troy Bousseau. Question?
So I had actually heard that ice water was bad for you because it shocks your body. So that's not what I'm not trying to prove that point. What I'm saying is, where do you, you hear so many conflicting things.
Yeah.
What should you really, the main message is, what? That just drink a lot of water and that just don't worry about the rest of it? Because we're going to get into this stuff. What would you say is the one thing we really need to do that we should never stray from?
Water.
Okay.
Yeah. Water, I think, is... if you get caught in the desert, or if you get caught, anywhere, you can live, 30 days without food. You can go 3 or 4 days without sleep, possibly. You can't without water. Water is just, it's so vitally important to good health, good thinking, good health, good digestion, pretty much everything. If you want to look younger, feel younger, everything, drink a lot of water. So if I were to say, look, one of the reasons I purposely, specifically didn't talk about exercise a lot, because a lot of times it's just not part of our lifestyle, and exercise means different things to different people. Exercise helps, there's no question. Increasing your blood flow and all those things, you release endorphins and all the other things, and that's a conversation for a different day. But without water, you cannot feel good. Without exercise, you can feel fine. I know a lot of people who've never exercised a day in their lives, they feel great. And they can go out and do a hike when they need to, or they can go do other things. If you don't drink water, you cannot feel your best, period. It's just the way that it goes. With regard to ice water shocking your body, that to me is ridiculous. How can we live in cold environments and walk outside? Wouldn't we all die? I'm sure if you were, I would say this, if you're outside 120 degrees and you just finished a long run or something, I would not drink ice water. I think that would probably be a bad idea.
That was probably the context in which this was invented.
Yeah. But I've never heard of anybody dying because they drink ice water. So, yes?
Back to melatonin.
Yeah,
Can you supplement that?
you can. Yeah, actually, Dr. Mercola, and it's drmercola.com. He's a naturopath. Just an amazing, amazing blog. If you want to read about some, not just naturopathy, but kind of common sense medical type stuff. He actually has a melatonin product, which is a supplement. I think it's a spray, if I'm not mistaken. But it absolutely, you can absolutely replace it. I don't know. And I don't know that it's been fully studied yet with regard to like how much that really does, but by all means, I think that if you have any of these things that we talked about interrupting your sleep, then I would definitely look into doing it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so you'd have to experiment with what works for you or what the most effective product is out there. Dr. Mercola, I think, would be a good place to start. But yeah, I actually read a lot about that. Yes?
What's the minimum hours of sleep at night to get that amount of melatonin that you can?
Yeah, they say 8. Yeah, I mean, it's still, they're standing pretty firm on the 8. Yeah, they haven't changed that. The internet didn't change the 8, unfortunately. We haven't figured out how to ingest sleep.
So that truly can vary per person.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, obviously anything I'm talking about is averages with regard to that kind of stuff. I mean, I feel like if I get 8, and because I haven't gotten 8 in probably 20 years, I feel kind of lethargic if I get too much sleep.
Are you familiar with Tim Ferriss?
Yeah.
Did you look at 4-Hour Body?
Yeah, I haven't read any of his books. I'm aware of the links that he goes to measure his chemistry and his physiology. It's amazing.
One thing that I found, I didn't read the whole book either, and I didn't read word for word, but one thing that I found was extremely helpful of connecting with what you're saying is he studied, did all, like you said, all the extensive studies. He went through all those extensive studies with sleep. And what he found was that, with all the rhythms, the RAM and all that kind of stuff, what he found is that it breaks down to like 8, 6.5, 4, and what I did is I tried the 4.5.
Okay.
And for a complete two complete sleep cycles, and I tried that. I did a 90-day challenge.
Okay.
And for those days, I only slept 4.5 hours.
Okay.
And absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it. And I had gone, I went from that all the way, I went from where I was, I would do this.
Yeah.
We don't have somebody, come in and slam clock. So I went from sleeping as much as I wanted. So I could wake up whatever I felt like it. I went from that, which would be 8, 10, 6, 7 hours, whatever it was, to that. And had zero problem. Maybe the first day, kind of had a little bit of like, but what you do is you do the 4.5 hours of sleep, and then what you're supposed to do is take 2 30-minute naps during that time, during the day.
Yeah.
And I found it to be outstanding. In that book, it gives, it's brief. It doesn't get all scientific.
Yeah.
His writing style is really cool. It's like.
Yeah, there's a lot on sleep studies, and everyone that I read was very consistent with regard to the cycles that we go through. So it makes sense that the one thing about sleep I think that probably I left out was consistency. Just to let your body always sort of hit whatever rhythms you're going to be getting into, is to hit those same rhythms consistently.
That's what I think was most valuable.
Yeah.
Probably one of the most valuable things about that, because I knew I had to go to bed this certain time.
Yeah.
It was only getting 4.5 hours, but I got, like you said, that rhythm. It was like, you know what? I got to be in bed at this time.
Yeah, it's tough when you have kids and things that lock you into a certain wake-up time. I mean, for me, I went to bed the other night at 5 and had to get up at 6. There was nothing that I could do about that. So that was something.
He also did a deal, Matt, who's the guy that put together WordPress, the code and all that whole Matt.
Chuck?
Yeah. He did a deal where he was only sleeping, he was sleeping like doing 20-minute naps throughout the day. It wasn't sleeping.
I read a deal about that.
The Uber man.
Yeah, it's
Uber. Called it. And,
what's it called? Uber?
The Uber man.
The Uber man?
Program. It's like, that's what it was called in the book. So I don't know if you look online, if you look that up, but that's
a polyphasic sleep.
Okay. Isn't that what Einstein did?
Yeah.
Somebody like that, kind of a lot of naps and things like that. I'm sure we could probably find a lot of sleep. I think there's a lot of variations in sleep, more than the other two, with regard to sugar and water. Sleep is definitely something that could vary, and I think you probably train your body quite a bit. And again, my mom works graveyards, but she's only done that for about 2 years, and I will say I've noticed just a sharp decrease in her cognition.
I've heard about it because like natural rhythm is the sun awake.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to fight evolution. I mean, our body makeup is, a long time in the making. Yeah.
So about the water thing, I don't know if it's 100% true, but somebody told me a long time ago that unless your urine is completely clear, then you're not, then you are dehydrated. So that's what I try and do every day. But here, and that's why I noticed, like, it's a lot easier for me to do that in Florida, for instance, versus Arizona, and it takes less to maintain that. But here, it's like, I mean,
constantly.
You're just constantly taking water.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Actually, I had it in my notes. I never brought it up, but that's an excellent point. And that's kind of when you know when you've had enough water is when your pee is completely clear. And your pee should always be completely clear. But when I went to Denver over the summer a couple times, I felt like I couldn't drink enough water. I mean, I was drinking just so much water. And but it's also important. Like we had a kid with us this summer. We took him up camping, and he was drinking. Every time I turned around, he was drinking another bottle of water. And we were up in Flagstaff. It was really thin air, dry air. He got a wicked headache at the end of the day, and he, it kind of occurred to me how much water he had drank throughout the day. So we were about to give him an aspirin. We gave him a Gatorade instead, and the headache was gone in like 5 minutes. And what was happening was he was starting to get that hyponatremia thing going, where he had drank enough water and flushed enough of his salts out, and the air was thin, and all of the other sort of factors converged. So it is important to listen to your body, and sometimes you have to replace salts and those kinds of things. We just hadn't eaten a lot throughout the day. We were hiking around and stuff. So, question? Yeah.
Is there a place we can get like a copy of the every presentation?
Yeah, I think it's on the. Will the presentation go to?
If you send it to me,
yeah, I'll send. Yeah, it'll be on the game plank or
it'll be somewhere
you
on
can
something
email me.
game plank.
I'll send it to you.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'll have to source it and stuff. I'll throw in some links. Any other questions?
Thank you, Troy.
Thanks.